now. All right, everybody say hi, YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
All right, good. So, okay, hi, YouTube was enough, guys. Thank you. All right, so today we're going to talk about NURBS surfaces and meta objects. We're going to start with NURBS surfaces. And all a surface is, if we do Shift A to add something, we have been working entirely with meshes pretty much for this entire course. And a mesh is an object that has the things we are familiar with. It has vertices, it has faces, and it has edges. The type of shape that we're going to talk about today is called a surface. And a surface is a section of material or a shape that has been drawn between curves that doesn't actually have vertices and edges and faces by default. So it doesn't behave like a mesh. But what it allows us to do is to create smoother, more intricate faces than we would if we were just using something like extrude or a base object like a cube or a sphere. And the reason that it's a little bit different is for those of you who have ever used an editor, I'm not sure if Paint has this, but if you guys have used something like Illustrator before where you draw paths and curves and you're able to manipulate curves with these little handles that let you either increase the curve or decrease the curve, that's the type of thing that we're doing here. So I am going to add, in the middle of my scene, I'm going to go to Surface and I'm going to add a NURBS circle. And a NURBS circle looks like any other circle that we've added before, any flat two-dimensional circle, except that if I go into edit mode, and I'm actually going to turn this guy on its side so we can see this a little bit better. I'm going to turn this guy this way. There we go. So if I go into edit mode, we notice that this circle is actually inside of a set of vertices that represent its boundaries. The difference here is that rather than modifying a circle on the face or vertex level, we're instead changing the curves. Uh-oh, that's not good. This HDMI cable seems to be having some issues. Okay. Hopefully that, we're still recording. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. Hi, YouTube. Hi, YouTube. Yeah, hi, YouTube. We're back.
It was anonymous.
I hope not. I certainly hope that they're not targeting my 3D art and animation class in Saco Maine. Okay, so we've got these points that we're using to control the curves of our mesh. For example, if I grab this vertex here and then I move it around like I would any other vertex in edit mode, what it's actually going to do is modify this curve. It's kind of like proportional editing in the sense that it gives us a slightly smoother transition or effect, but it's modifying it based on a shape that governs, guys, attention up here please, a shape that governs the boundaries of the circle rather than, Parker, I'll make you put it away completely. So it surrounds the shape completely and modifies the boundaries of it rather than modifying the individual points on the shape itself. So what we're going to do is talk about how we can use these NURBS shapes to create surfaces between them. So I'm going to go ahead and exit edit mode, and then I'm going to use Shift D to duplicate this guy a couple of times, maybe 3 times. So we end up with 4 shapes like that. And what these NURBS objects are good for are creating faces between them that allow us to create shapes that are a little bit more unique. So if I go into edit mode and change some of these, because I want them to all be a little different, I'm going to select my second shape and go into edit mode, and I'm just going to grab any one of these vertices and move it around a little bit. I'll pull that one up and then move over to this guy and maybe grab this vertex and drop it down a little bit. And then finally, we're just going to take this one and scale it up. So what a surface allows us to do is all of this space that exists between our circles, we're going to group all of these circles together, and then we're going to use fill to create a surface between them. So we should end up with a tunnel whose shapes and curves match the shapes and curves of the circle. And what I'm going to do now isn't anything we haven't seen before. It's just a slightly different application of it. So I'm going to use my circle select tool to grab all of these guys. And then I'm going to go to tools, and I'm going to go to join to make them one thing. And the last step is just doing a fill, which we've done before in here. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to use A to make sure I have everything selected. And then hopefully, I'm going to use F to do nothing. Come on. F, there we go, to fill it. And so what we end up with, if I leave edit mode, what we end up with is a surface that has been used to interconnect all of the individual circles that build up this tunnel. So unlike using something like a cylinder, which would be, potentially larger or smaller at any given end, but we'd have to extrude and we'd have to do a bunch of really fine-tuned manipulation to create a shape like this, instead we can create several of these NURBS circles that allow us to create more smooth flowing curves and then connect them to make an interesting 3D shape. You guys are going to be using this today to make a glass lamp. So the idea is that you're going to have circles that outline the shape of the lamp that you want, and then you're going to use this technique to fill it with a surface. However, if you want to make fine-tuned control to this guy, if we go into edit mode, the big problem now is that we've got all these confusing connections between vertices, and it's no longer easy to edit. What would be a lot simpler is if once we had a surface, we could edit it as if it was a mesh, and that's what our new shortcut is for today. So with this guy selected, I'm pressing the wrong button. I want to be out of edit mode, and then I'm going to use Alt-C. Some of you guys may have come across this when we talked about 3D text, if you wanted your 3D text to become a 3D object. But we're going to press Alt-C, and then we're going to choose Mesh from Curve Meta Surface Text. And what that does, it looks like nothing happened, but now if I go into edit mode, the shape that I've made is now a mesh with all of the vertices and edges and faces that we would expect to see. So now we can edit it as if it were any other shape in Blender that we've created. So these NURBS objects give us an easier opportunity to make smooth curves and contours, and then we're able to edit it as if it were an ordinary mesh. And then we can do all the normal things we could normally do to meshes. We can texture it, add a material, do lighting, reflectivity, all that fun stuff, which you're going to need to do for your lab today. Okay, so in my opinion, the NURBS objects part of this lecture, it's kind of neat, but it's not nearly as interesting as the meta objects. So we're going to do those now. And both of these are just different types of things that we can add from our adding menu. So we've only done meshes, now we're learning about surfaces, and next we're going to look at this category called Metaball. And a Metaball actually isn't just a ball, it comes in all kinds of different types, but we're going to use ball for right now. A Metaball is an object that's meant to simulate liquid relationships between objects. And I think the easiest way to see what I mean by that is just to add some. I'm going to move this guy out of the way for a moment. So this is a metaball. The actual physical 3D object is just this ball part in the middle. This outer circle represents a force field, kind of a field of influence of our ball. Any other metaballs that come in contact with that force field are going to be affected by it. So let's take a look at how they are affected. So I'm going to add another metaball. And right now these guys aren't touching. But if I move this closer, they start to become attached to one another. And it's kind of hard to see from this angle. Let's see if I can turn my view around here. There we go. That's better. So as soon as their spheres of influence kind of collide with each other, they act as if they are liquid, and they morph into one another like that. And the nice thing here is that we're not really doing any complex, we're not required to understand any of the complex physics that are happening here. right? This is a calculation being done entirely by Blender. It's handling the merging of surfaces and the distance or field of influence between the shapes. And we can add as many of these metaballs as we want, and they'll all interact in the same way. The only thing that's tricky about dealing with a metaball is the first one we add. If I click that, the first metaball is always connected to every other meta object that we add. So notice that when I click this guy, if I try to move it around, oh, it should move. Maybe it's this guy. Stop it. Yeah, okay. So you see how when I click this guy, it's the opposite one. When I click the opposite ball, it moves the first ball that I added. The first ball that I added is our reference point for the entire system. If I want to move individual balls within the system, I have to select the ring and not the ball. And in general, that's just an easier rule to follow. If we're dealing with metaballs, always select the ring. Don't try to mess with the individual shapes because it won't work the way that you expect it to. So instead, if we grab this ring right here, we can move this ball all around. Okay. And if we wanted to, if for some reason we didn't want these to be meta objects anymore, we could do the same shortcut to turn them into meshes. So we could throw them together and then make them meshes instead of meta objects, and they would behave just like meshes do. All right, are there any questions about this? Yes?
Could you give a material to a metaball?
Yes, you can give a material to a metaball. The other thing that we can change if we want to, I'll show you one setting. So Metaballs add a new button in the button bar. It's called the metadata or the metaball data. And basically what this does, the only one we really care about is this thing called threshold. If we decrease the threshold, it means that the balls take up more of their sphere of influence. And if we increase the threshold, then they take up less of their sphere of influence. So it basically governs how far away from the ball it starts to affect other shapes. We'll put this guy back to 0.6. But yeah, we can add meshes to it, or materials to it, and that's something that we're actually going to do today. Are there any other questions about the NURBS shapes or the metaballs? The big thing with any of these objects is, given how much we know about Blender right now, it's more that I want to make you guys aware that these things exist, and then have you guys create with them, right? So if you have an interesting use of a surface or a metaball for your animation, then great, feel free to include it. But I want to make sure we know that they are there. Okay, everybody say bye, YouTube.